You're listening to the Biohackers World Podcast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dallas McClain of Lifespanning Magazine. I'm here with Dr. Nathan Bryan of N101, and of course, you have many things going on in the nitric oxide world. You're seen as the king of nitric oxide, so to speak. So, Dr. Nathan Bryan, we've known each other a long time. I appreciate you taking time to sit down with me today at Biohackers World here in Miami. So, welcome.
Well, thanks. Great being with you. Great being in sunny Florida and South Beach.
Yeah. We're trying to, wake ourselves up naturally. We were just talking before the interview, and one of those good things to do is just get the sunlight early in the morning. But also, you were talking about beet powder recently, and a lot of people are catching on to this beet trend in the world today that I've seen. So can you talk to me a little bit about why beets are seen as that special energy food and how that correlates with your work you're doing with nitric oxide?
Well, I think there's a misconception, and beets aren't really a great source of nitric oxide.
Oh, really? Okay.
Beets became popular in 2012 Olympic Games. There was some early data coming out of some research groups out of London showing that if you had a standardized amount of nitrate in your beetroot juice, that could be converted into nitric oxide, but it depended upon the oral bacteria and it depended upon stomach acid production. Mm. So many Olympic athletes were using beet juice in the 2012 Olympic Games. And then all these companies started launching beetroot products. But they didn't understand the science and the mechanism. And so today, most of these beet products on the market are just dead beets. There's no nitrate, there's no nitric oxide activity. And it's doing the customers a disservice because they're not getting the benefits that were intended.
Yeah.
So it's not the beets that's providing the benefit, it's what's in the beets. And that's the nitric oxide. So what I've been able to do is distill that out of the beets, and now we make a fermented beet powder that is optimized for nitric oxide. And so that's what I start my day with, every morning, taking a shot of my beet powder, which produces nitric oxide, dilates my blood vessels, get my blood flow going, and then I work out, and then I watch the sun come up.
That's a great way to start the day.
Can't beat it.
I like that. So what is a good way then for people to discern between what's a product that actually does help produce real natural nitric oxide and something that's just maybe faulty or a good marketing budget?
Well, typically what I found is the people who spend the most money on marketing have the least amount of science because they have to continually go out and acquire that customer, because eventually customers will catch on that they take this product, they don't get the benefit, and then they think that nitric oxide doesn't work. And, I get dozens of emails every week from people who say, Nathan, we hear you talk about nitric oxide, and I've been taking this beet product that's been advertised on TV. I haven't seen a benefit. It hasn't normalized my blood pressure. It hasn't improved my performance, all the things that they claim nitric oxide does. So they say, well, nitric oxide doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, that's a very dangerous interpretation because nitric oxide always works. What failed you and what doesn't work is that product and that company selling that product. So it's very difficult to discern. So what I say is, ignore the beets. There's really no beet products on the market that do what our beets do, because I spent 25 years in academia, published over 100 peer-reviewed publications, several dozen issued patents. So I've been in this science for 25, almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And so what we do is if your body can't make nitric oxide, then we've provided technology that does it for you. Right, so if you're low in testosterone, we give you testosterone. If you're a woman, you're low in estrogen, we give you estrogen. If you're low in nitric oxide, we give you the gas. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most people don't understand is nitric oxide is an actual gas. It's not a capsule you can take or swallow. It's not a beet you can chew or consume. It's an actual gas. And we understand the chemistry. We understand the physiology and enzymology of how the human body makes nitric oxide. We understand what leads to a loss of its natural production. And then we fix that.
So if it's a gas, then the natural question in my mind pops up is why can't we breathe it in or interact with it with our lungs to get it into our system?
Well, you can. The only FDA-approved indication for nitric oxide is inhalative nitric oxide therapy. And this drug therapy has been approved since, I believe, the late 80s, early 90s. But it's for premature babies born with pulmonary hypertension. And the rationale was if you give nitric oxide to these very vulnerable, obviously very high-risk patient population, premature babies, 24, 27 weeks gestation, their lungs are underdeveloped, so they develop pulmonary hypertension, and then they don't fully oxygenate. And so they thought, well, if we give nitric oxide as a gas, it'll dilate the pulmonary arteries, relieve pulmonary hypertension, It's a bronchodilator as well as a vasodilator. It'll dilate the bronchioles, and then you can match ventilation to perfusion, and it saved millions and millions of babies' lives.
Wow.
But up until my discoveries, there wasn't a way to deliver nitric oxide gas in an outpatient setting. So if you're in the hospital in the intensive care unit, whether you're a neonate or an adult undergoing or bypass surgery, they now give inhaled nitric oxide to maintain blood oxygen saturation during bypass surgery. But if you're not in the hospital, there's not a way. I mean, you don't see people walking around with a nitric oxide tank, breathing it.
Right. It's not available to just a regular everyday consumer.
It's not available, and that was what we've been trying to solve for the past 30 years in the nitric oxide field, is how do we deliver nitric oxide gas in a solid dose form, in an outpatient setting, in a shelf-stable product.
Right.
And that was my first product. It was an orally disintegrating tablet that you put this lozenge in your mouth. I designed it to have a resident time of about 5 to 6 minutes, and we're releasing a certain amount of nitric oxide gas over a certain period of time. In fact, I dialed the level of nitric oxide in based on what was safe in premature babies. So if this dose is safe in premature babies, then it's certainly safe as a dietary supplement.
Sure.
So that's really the only technology out there that I developed, this orally disintegrating tablet. And then obviously we took that same technology, that same concept, and then made a beet product where we remove the oxalates, remove the beet pulp, beet taste, and create a fermented beet powder that when you put it in water, it generates NO gas. So the design is you take one sachet, put it in 2 to 3 ounces of water, mix it up. I use a frother, and then take it as a shot.
Very nice.
Now, when you consume that, we're generating nitric oxide systemically.
I want to get into the mechanism of action behind it, of how the gas is absorbed by the cells and in what pathway. But first, you mentioned you were the first one to kind of come out with this nitric oxide alternative outside of hospital care and everything like that. So because you were the first, I imagine there were a few obstacles, a few things to overcome,
For sure.
a few things to start, and maybe a lot of things that discouraged people from going into that space and making that challenge. So can you talk to me a little bit about what you had to kind of overcome to get into that space?
Yeah, so I was a professor of molecular medicine at University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. And academic institutions, especially in medical schools, are tasked with developing drug therapy or diagnostics or medical devices, something to improve patient care. What they're not in the business of is developing dietary supplements, right? So when I was screening natural product libraries, and we'd figured out a way how to make nitric oxide using natural products. So we got letters of opinion, and it was thought the FDA told us that since nothing's synthetic in here, and we're basically giving components that are found ordinarily in an ordinary dietary pattern, that we could bring this to market as a dietary supplement.
Yeah.
So that was my first product. And then when I went to my leadership at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, they frowned upon that. You know, in fact, that some people called me a snake oil salesman because I was selling dietary supplements.
Wow.
But I go, okay, well, I'll put my product through the same rigor as drug therapy. So I went out and I did randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials, demonstrated that it was not only safe, but it was very efficacious in improving blood flow, dilating blood vessels, supporting healthy blood pressure, improving exercise performance. So that was the first hurdle, and then they were convinced. And then the other challenge was, once we developed this, then other companies started trying to copy what we were doing.
Sure.
Because they just see the ingredients and they go, they would just throw all these ingredients in a bag and in a capsule and call it nitric oxide.
Right.
So now we created a market. I created a market for the product, and then other people entered, and now we've got all these competitors out there.
Yeah.
But these people don't understand the science. They don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, their products don't work.
Right.
And then once we were successful, then you have people that come after you, because when you're doing stuff that's disruptive and matters, you become a target.
Sure.
And so I've had companies sue me. I've had people come after me personally, professionally, try to destroy me and what I've built. So those are the things that you have to be ready for. You have to know it's coming. And when people come after you, you're on the right path because you're doing something that matters. If you're doing stuff that doesn't matter, people leave you alone.
And beyond just your daily nitric oxide supplementation and other ways of staying healthy, how do you power yourself to get through those difficult moments when the world feels like it's against you?
Well, no, I rely on my faith more than anything, because I think I realize that, things don't happen to us, things happen for us.
Yeah.
And I know God has a plan for me. I've been extremely blessed, and I just don't want to squander the opportunity and the blessings. But
Amen.
I just think I start every day. I wake up with a servant's heart, and I express gratitude, and I start my day with prayer and in a sauna, and just I figure out what my strategy is for the day. What do I got to do to accomplish what I want to do, and then I figure out how I'm going to execute, and I don't let anything get in my way.
That's a good way of putting it. We hear a lot of pain to purpose stories in the biohacking space and everything like that. So being able to align our suffering with meaning, I think just kind of gives us that extra push that, like you said, that extra reassurance that we're on the right path.
If you're going to live life on earth, there is suffering.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's inevitable.
Everyone suffers.
Everybody suffers.
Yeah, right.
But it's a matter of what can you learn from it?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? Because God's not going to put you through something that you can't endure.
Right.
And so that's what another thing I've come to the conclusion that I don't worry about things I can't control.
There you go. Yeah.
And so once I develop that mindset, then I realize I shouldn't worry about anything. Because how much control do we really have over anything?
Yeah.
So I just wake up with a smile on my face. I go through and, I experience challenges, and I'm just dead set on overcoming them and not let anybody stop me and keep me from doing what I hope to accomplish.
That's a great mindset to have, for sure. So talking a little bit about nitric oxide itself then, can you talk to me just about why it's such an important molecule in terms of helping you slow down aging, helping you keep chronic disease at bay, and why it's fundamental to our health?
Well, if you start with the end in mind, so if you look at every chronic disease, whether it's heart disease, neurovascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, diabetes, autoimmune, doesn't matter, liver disease, there's 4 things that always happen. There's decreased blood flow to that organ, there's runaway inflammation, there's oxidative stress, and then there's immune dysfunction that's found in that organ, the affected organ. And so nitric oxide overcomes all those. It dilates the blood vessels, so now you're going to get oxygen nutrients to that tissue. It decreases inflammation. In fact, I have a number of patents on methods of reducing inflammation. It inhibits the oxidative stress that you see in that tissue, and then it corrects the immune dysfunction. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of allopathic medicine type thinking, right?
Yeah.
You try to treat a disease, but what we're trying to do is be proactive instead of reactive.
Sure.
So when you look at what nitric oxide does under normal physiological conditions, when we make adequate amounts of it. So that means we have dilation of blood vessels. With each beat of the heart, we're dilating the blood vessels and dampening that pulse response, so there's less damage to the endothelial cells.
Okay.
It's down-regulating adhesion molecules in the lining of the blood vessels, so we don't have a lot of monocytes, neutrophils, platelet sticking, which is the earliest signs of vascular disease. It mobilizes stem cells, so now we can repair and replace dysfunctional cells.
Yeah.
It activates an enzyme called telomerase, so it prevents our telomeres from getting shorter. Shorter telomeres, shorter lifespan. Longer telomeres, longer lifespan. And then it activates the mitochondria, the energy-producing organelles of the cell, to produce more energy with less oxygen. So everything we know about human optimization, longevity, is dependent upon adequate production of nitric oxide.
And your product doesn't just give you nitric oxide necessarily to go into your cells. It also helps your body produce it.
No, that's exactly right. And, I didn't want to be like testosterone therapy, because once you start testosterone,
you can't get off of it.
You can't get off of it because it shuts down endogenous production.
Right.
And that's a great financial model, right? You want to put someone dependent upon your product for the rest of their life. That's pharma.
Right.
I didn't want that, because my job in the basic sciences was to understand what leads to a loss of nitric oxide production, and then how do we fix it?
Yeah.
Give the body what it needs, let the body do its job. So we wanted to make sure that when we're delivering nitric oxide, there's not some type of feedback inhibition that shuts down endogenous production. And you can only do that once you understand the enzymology and the biochemistry. So the lozenge and all products that we produce nitric oxide gas. If your body can't make it, we do it for you. Mm-hmm. But we understand the function of the NOS enzyme, the enzyme that makes nitric oxide in the lining of the blood vessels. And so we prevent the uncoupling of NOS. So now we're restoring nitric oxide production in the lining of the blood vessel. In fact, we see about a 20% improvement within 20 minutes. In some people, we see 60, 70%.
Improvement of what? The blood vessel dilation?
Endothelial function.
Okay.
So the ability of the blood vessel to produce nitric oxide on its own. And then because it's an orally disintegrating tablet, we're restoring the flora, the normal microbiome, the bacteria that are responsible for the production of nitric oxide. So there's 2 pathways to make nitric oxide. There's the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessel, and then there's the presence of the nitrate-reducing bacteria. And so we're fixing both of those. We're eliminating the pathogens, improving the non-pathogenic commensals, and we're restoring endothelial function. So theoretically, you would need less and less of my product over time.
Yeah.
Because we're constantly improving the body's ability to make it. But if you're not changing your diet, if you're not, if you don't live in a pristine environment where there's no 5G, there's no herbicides or pesticides, and there's, the food we eat is replete in all the nutrients, which unfortunately is not the case. I think what we're finding is you need a daily nitric oxide support. I've been taking my product now for probably 20 years, and I take it not because I need it, it's because I don't want to need it.
Right, yeah.
And I'm probably in the best shape of my life. I'm 51, and I feel better than I did when I was 20, 25, 30 years ago.
That's a good way of saying it and looking at it. But a question comes to my mind then. So we talked earlier about hospitals using nitric oxide to help people battle disease and everything. If nitric oxide is really one of the things that is the main root cause of a lot of chronic diseases, why aren't people just going to hospitals and requesting this nitric oxide therapy, or like they just do it for a limited amount of time and then they say you're better and then come back when you need it?
Well, it's a very expensive therapy
Okay.
to deliver it in a hospital setting. And it's only delivered in an ICU setting. So unless you're critically ill, you don't have access to it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it wouldn't even be available.
There's a lot of barriers.
Even if you want it.
Really.
Yeah. No, and we're trying to change that. I'm hosting the International Nitric Oxide meeting in Austin next year, April 23rd through 25th, where we're bringing the world's experts together to figure out, okay, how do we get nitric oxide therapies front and center? How do we continue to innovate?
Yeah.
And I think the reason that it's been so slow is big pharma's failed at this, right? If there was a nitric oxide drug on the market, then everybody would know about nitric oxide. But because most drugs are synthetic compounds that inhibit biochemical reactions to prevent an overproduction of a molecule, nitric oxide is different because all disease is due to an insufficient nitric oxide. So you can't develop that same inhibitor of nitric oxide and expect patients to get better.
Sure.
We have to give it, or we have to restore the natural production of it. And I think that's why what I do is so disruptive, because, most pharmaceutical companies thought you couldn't get a patent on nitric oxide or using natural product chemistry. And I've been able to do that through the University of Texas. I think we're moving this technology through drug therapy. We've got a drug in phase 3 clinical trials for heart disease. We've got a drug we're developing for Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And then we're developing a topical drug for diabetic ulcers.
That's awesome, because I feel like people pay attention to preventative medicine, but not as much as when the disease is slapping you in your face, and you have to you have to like treat it on the spot.
Well, people are motivated by fear.
Yeah.
Fear is the greatest motivating factor.
Yeah.
And until somebody has a heart attack or a stroke or diagnosed with diabetes or get a foot amputated, they don't change. They don't respond. And so we have to. My goal is to get safe and effective nitric oxide products in every category around the world. So we've done it in nutritional and dietary supplements. We've done it in skincare. We're doing it through drug therapy. And I believe that once we get this approved through the FDA, and there's a drug that physicians can write a script for, and their patients get better, it will become mainstream. And I think that's the next step in the evolution of the science of nitric oxide.
And when do you see us like getting to that area, like based on where you're at right now?
I predict probably by the end of next year we'll complete our clinical trials on ischemic heart disease.
Okay.
And best case scenario, maybe Q4 2026, Q1 2027.
Okay. So right around the corner.
We should, it's imminent.
Yeah.
So we're working hard to get that done, and then, then we'll work on our Alzheimer's drug study. That's going to be a more long-term, kind of a little bit more complex clinical trial, enrolling the right patient at the right stage of disease where we can show that we can prevent progression but also regression.
Yeah.
Because nitric oxide addresses the root cause of Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Hypoperfusion, insulin resistance in the brain.
Encephalitis.
Yeah, and the brain atrophy and the misfolding of proteins. So if you give nitric oxide, you dilate the blood vessels, you improve glucose uptake, you don't get protein misfolding, and you don't lose cognition.
So is there any chronic disease or ailment that nitric oxide can't really help or fix?
Not that I believe. The basic science tells us that loss of nitric oxide production is the earliest event in the onset and progression of most, if not all, age-related chronic disease. My job is to decide how much nitric oxide to give to a specific patient at the right time for that indication. So all of our drug studies will be based on titrating in the dose, the dosing regimen to address that specific condition or that indication that we go for. But, we're starting with heart disease. We'll go for Alzheimer's topical drugs. But as we progress that, we'll have a heart failure medication. We know nitric oxide is extremely beneficial and therapeutic in heart failure, pulmonary hypertension.
And last question, with nitric oxide in your product, is there something that you would recommend if someone could choose one or two things to add to their daily habit that would just help naturally produce nitric oxide or consume nitric oxide?
Elimination of sugar and simple carbs. Anything that shows an increase in blood sugar will disrupt nitric oxide production. Do both pathways. Changes the oral microflora, disrupts the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessel, so sugar's the enemy.
Yeah, stay away from sugar. If you could take anything away from this, nitric oxide, stay away from sugar.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you.
All right.
Come join us at Biohackers World in 2026, coming to an area near you.